And then where I know the will and the trust, they play a very large part in this process. And so talk to us about where you think the will and the trust come in, and how critical is it that people have a will or a trust, and what happens if they don't? I mean, that's a lot of questions, but let's go for it.
Yeah, no, all great questions. So obviously the will is important because that's your wishes on paper, right? What do you want to have happen when you pass away? Now, a will is a great thing to have. Everybody needs to have it. But more importantly, you got to make sure that your beneficiary designations are done correctly on all of your assets. I know that's something that gets missed far too often, unfortunately. And sometimes we see it where, yeah, you had your spouse on as a primary, but you had no contingents. So what happens in the event that the plane goes down and you're both in it, right? It's stuff like that that people they don't really think through. And then more importantly, depending upon kind of your asset level and things that you're wanting to have happen when you pass away, a trust could be very, very vital. That way your wishes continue to live on with your money, and it also puts protections in place for your family members so you can avoid the infighting and things of that nature.
I think a lot of people don't really understand that a will is actually part of a trust.
Correct.
So a complete trust is going to include a will,
yep,
healthcare powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney, healthcare directives. So your trust is not just a simple document that is a standalone. It includes all those pieces.
Correct. It's an estate plan.
Right. And that flows into other issues where people may be naming their trust as the beneficiary to their IRA and maybe not understanding what are the implications of the trust inheriting the IRA versus a real person inheriting the IRA, and the difference in the tax ramifications and how that might affect the beneficiaries.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal, especially with the event of the Secure Act back in 2019. So if somebody does have special verbiage in their trust for IRAs, they may need to revisit that. It's not saying that a trust can't be the beneficiary of a tax-deferred account. It most certainly can, but things have to be done properly so that there's not a tax nightmare for the beneficiaries.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I see happening all too often with the vast majority of the population is that people will get a trust drawn up, and they take that trust and they set it on the shelf, and it's a really pretty binder with a lot of words and a lot of pieces of paper. And inside that trust, most attorneys have listed, here are your funding instructions. These are your responsibilities now. And it is to retitle assets into the trust, to change beneficiaries the way that the titling instructions say to do. But so many times the individual thinks that I've got my binder, it's done.
Oh, yeah.
But if they don't go and then fully fund the trust, then they've wasted money with that attorney in preparing that trust. And then another factor, Will, is maybe they get the funding done, but then they don't revisit that trust for a decade or for 2 decades.
Yep.
And by the time something happens and the trust needs to be utilized, none of the intents that they want now were the same as what they wanted then, yet they didn't go back and revisit and amend and update that trust. So how often would you recommend, once a person gets a trust in place, should they be reviewing that trust?
I think every other year would be good housekeeping rules. Bare bones minimum every 3 to 5, right? Because not only does your personal situation potentially change and what your wishes are, but again, laws change. So we want to make sure that everything is staying intact and doing exactly what you want to do.
So are you on the attorney full employment committee then? Do you want them to visit with attorneys and pay money that often?
No, but a simple review, just reading through, again, making sure all the players are the correct players. I mean, say for an example, you list a family member to be a trustee after you pass away, and unfortunately that family member passes away, right? You need to make sure that those things are being kept up to date.
Starting your route to retirement.